Welcome to AZ800. This is the introduction module that's going to give you the background of what all the content is going to be that we're going to covering, how to prepare for the exam, some additional materials that you may need available for you, as well as an expectation of some of the prerequisites that you may have as we expect some background knowledge as we enter into the course itself. So my name is Bob Tickelman, and I'm currently a Microsoft Technical Trainer on the Microsoft Technical Training team. In the previous, I've been a Premier Field Engineer, I've been a Cloud Solution Architect at a wide variety of roles with Azure Active Directory, with Azure Stack, our on-premises solution. Previously, I was involved with Exchange as well as Active Directory Domain Services because it was the first Exchange-enabled product that we dealt with. But I've got a long history of dealing with a wide variety of our content, and I hope to bring that knowledge of both the past as well as the present to this delivery as we're going through. The hybrid role itself is the reality of today. You know, most people have an on-premises or some legacy infrastructure that they're dealing with, as well as migrating some or all of their work to the cloud. And so this course I really love doing because it takes that traditional environment and it does a compare and contrast throughout the entire course, where we're going to spend in the first module, we'll take a look at that legacy Active Directory Domain Services and what it provided and how to manage it, and then we'll contrast that with an Azure Active Directory model. And we'll do that throughout the entire course, but it is really to give you that hybrid role of what goes where, some of the terms that might be confusing because we use the term Active Directory extensively, but I'm going to be very clear on the distinctions between the various kinds of Active Directory that you have. Hopefully you're scratching your head going, there's different kinds, but that's what we're going to answer in this course. From a prerequisites perspective, if you don't have these, I still think that there's huge value that you can get from watching some of these modules. And in a self-paced learning, you can go off and get some of that background information that you may need. But what we'd like to have, and we're going to assume that some of that fundamental networking features of public and private IP addresses, you know, a light understanding of DHCP and some of those legacy technologies are going to help you, but I don't think it's going to hinder you from being able to be successful through this course itself. This module, or the modules that we're going to be delivering, correspond to the AZ800 certification. Now that is just an exam and a certification for this course. It is part of a partner class, the AZ801, which covers the rest of the technologies that get more into the day-to-day operations as opposed to the more infrastructure setup parts. But the combination of the AZ800 and the 801, done in any order, you can take the exams, you can take the courses in whatever order that you want, but once you have both of them, you're going to get the hybrid administrator designation. That's a special badge that you have, and I've gone through this. Throughout the course, I'll be talking about some eye-winking moments. It would be illegal, as well as I'd get myself fired for giving you questions and answers off of the exam. But there's certain content, you'll see this coming up in a few slides, that is critical for you to focus on, and I'll go into topics, and hopefully you'll understand what we're looking for and the broad range of information that you need to be aware of. Most of our exams are scored out of 700 out of 1,000 points, and these points are going to be gathered from a variety of areas, and most of our courses, again, are examined on 5 specific topic areas, and you're seeing a breakdown of those topic areas in this chart right now. And the vast majority of it, 30 to 35% of the questions across the broad range of case studies, scenario-based, potentially a lab, and the question and answer sections are going to come from the Azure Active Directory and the Active Directory Domain Services, that main infrastructure of identity. At Microsoft, we talk about identity as the new perimeter of security, and it's that key feature, and it's one of the great barriers that you can put up, because the reality of today is no longer are people working in a known location that you can control. The reality of today, and especially in the post-pandemic world, but even before, people were working from home, people were working on the road, and having that perimeter security, is no longer good enough. It's around the identity and being able to distinguish the identities, because Bob, as a user in a corporate environment on a corporate device, is a completely different security persona from Bob on his laptop in a public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop. So we'll take a look at some of those. Another area that we take a look at is managing the workloads, both on premises and in the hybrid world. And we'll take a look at the broad range of tools. One of the things I've said for years, one of the great things about the Windows environment, there's anywhere from 1 to 7 different ways to do everything. Well, one of the confusing things about the Windows environment is there's anywhere from 1 to 7 different ways to do it. Whether you use the graphical interface, whether you use PowerShell, some command line interface, we've got some administrative tools that we look at. There's things called MMC, or Microsoft Management Consoles. So we'll be giving you an introduction to a variety of these. I'm going to spend most of my time in the graphical interfaces, but as you get into Azure particularly, we recommend that you start working with some kind of command line interface, templates and scripting to be able to manage that. So we'll take a look at this broad range of tools available for us. We'll then take a look at some of the management of traditional workloads. How do I take applications and how do I build virtual machines and deploy containers and Kubernetes and this variety of ways to take an application and provide it the core resources of compute, memory, storage, and network that they may need, some or all of those. How do I bundle those up and make them available? And so we'll take a look at virtual machines and containers. Then we're going to take a look at the networking infrastructure. It's always been an important part, and particularly as you start moving towards Azure, just getting to Azure, you're going to need a network, and then managing that networking infrastructure. Now, one of the great things about this, if you're not strong on networking, don't worry. Whatever knowledge you have is going to be useful, because it wouldn't make sense that if we did things differently from a networking perspective in Azure than you did on premises. So it is just taking everything that you've already known about networking, and we're going to then superset that with some of the capabilities that you can work with within the Azure environment itself, and some of the unique features within Azure that you can take advantage of and leverage. And then we'll take a look at storage in a variety of methods. Traditionally, in other courses like the AZ 104, we talk about the 3 types of data storage. We take a look at what's called unstructured data, that traditional volumes of information of different file types of XLSs and .docs and JPEGs and MP3s and all that variety, that unstructured data. We then take a look at lightly structured data using things like Cosmos DB, Azure Tables, Redis caches that are available for you. And then the third part of that is the highly structured or SQL type data that you're dealing with. We're not going to get into all that. We're going to take a look at traditional storage, more from how do I provision disks and how do I have redundancy and things that terms you might have heard of, RAID, redundant array of independent or inexpensive disks, depending on which acronym you prescribe to. But we'll take a look at how we implement storage in an on-premises environment and then compare and contrast that with storage within the cloud using an Azure service. We have a broken up set of modules that we're going to cover, and these modules follow to what are called lessons or learning plans. And so the next 2 slides are going to cover the 5 major learning plans and then the modules that correspond to them. We will be delivering this content in small chunks, typically about 30 minutes, and they're going to follow to that module plan that we have. And so as I get to the end of a module, instead of continuing on, we'll take a break, we'll do a knowledge check on that module, and then we'll come back in a different recording for the next stage of that learning path that you're dealing with. But you see, learning path number 1 covers quite a bit about that traditional on-premises Active Directory domain services environment. We'll give you some of the background in there, and there's going to be quite a bit of these first couple of modules as we go through this. All of the content you can follow along with if you want to, in addition to these recordings, and I'll be giving you the link to that in just a few minutes. We then take a look at learning path number 2. We get into that hybrid workload, those areas that almost correspond to the 5 areas of the exam that we're going to cover. We then take a look at virtualization in containers. That's learning path number 3. Getting into learning path number 4, we get into that networking infrastructure. And learning path number 5 is that storage. And you're going to see that there's a wide variety of modules. I think that there's 7 modules in learning path number 1 specifically. And so we'll go through that. And as I said, I'm going to show you what's coming up on the next slide. The content, if you want to follow along, I'm not here to read slides. I'm not here to read the content to you. Hopefully you're more than capable of doing that. What I will be doing, all the slides that I have, I should be careful, most of the slides I have are represented in the learning content itself. So often people ask us is, how do I get the slides? Don't worry about that. 99% of the images that I'm going to show you on the slides or the content that's on the slides comes directly from the Microsoft Learn modules. And Microsoft, late in 2022, Microsoft has adopted Microsoft Learn as our learning platform for all of our content, and it's available there for free. Now, what we've created or curated is a list of modules for this content. And so the link there that you see on the screen, aka.ms/AZ-800, this course number, Learn Collection, will get you a collection of all the modules that we feel cover the content in a degree that would allow you to be able to pass the exam. Now, this is also a bit of an eye-winky moment, not for the exam, but for other courses. If you wanted to, say, take the partner class to this one, the AZ-801, that would be just AZ-801 Learn Collection, and you would be able to get the collection of modules for that content as well. I'm going to be doing a demonstration of this in just a second, but this is where you're going to get a lot of the content. I've augmented some of the slides just to go along with the story or narrative that I have. Nothing really super important in there. It just helps me describe visually some of the content that we want to take a look at. So the learning path specifically, you're going to the Microsoft Learn site, following that link, you will land on a page that looks very similar to this one. And it's going to then go through and curate all of the individual Learn modules. And so this Introduction to Active Directory Domain Services. Now, this is part of the learning path that has several modules in it. So I'm going to just select this one, and you can see that it estimates about an hour time here to go through all of the modules within this learning path that you have. So we're now at the learning path. It's going to then get me into the individual components that makes up this module that you're dealing with. There's an introduction at about 2 minutes. I'm not going to go through all of it. I just want to show you a couple of features. And these are actually quite interesting. Some of them have just text. Some of them have visual graphics. Some of them have recordings. And in fact, one of the modules that we'll cover a little bit later actually has a recording of doing something in Active Directory that relates to the quizzes. It says, at 2 minutes and 45 seconds of the video that you watched, what were they doing? And so there's a quiz question that comes up, and you'll see that under the knowledge check features that we have. In addition, some of them actually have labs. They have a lab environment that will spin up for you to be able to go off and practice some of these things. So just giving you an example of coming into, define Active Directory Domain Services, you're going to see a list of content, and you're going to see this on the slides when you get into that first module I'm about to deliver. Is what is a partition, what is a schema, and they have a small subset. They've got a chart that's on the slide that lists all of those items on the left-hand side of the screen, and maybe one or two sentences from the volume of content on the right-hand side from this content. So I'm going to go through the content. I'm going to use it as a reference. I'm hopefully going to give you some knowledge that isn't in the lessons, and then if you want to go back and refresh that, come to this content, and you'll be able to get all of that content available to you. You're going to see this as one of the images that comes up on my slide that I'm dealing with. But all of those features are there. Just as a side note, if you want to do this, in the upper right-hand corner of the Microsoft Learn site, I would suggest that you log in with a personal Microsoft account. This is something at Outlook.com or something at Live.com or at Hotmail. And what it can do is it can actually keep track of the modules that you've delivered or taken and completed. They've gamified it a bit. You can get points by doing individual modules. You can see I got 100 points by going through and completing this page and clicking next. As you do the quizzes, you get points for it. So you can kind of gamify this, but you can also keep track, more importantly, of all the modules that you've covered and get these points accumulated. Okay, so that's where you can get the content itself. Taking a look at Other additional resources, so the Microsoft Learn, in addition to what we've got as a curated list for this AZ800 course, there's other pieces. As I said, when we get into public and private IP addresses and custom subnetting, if you're not that familiar with that topic, I won't be going into it, but by all means, go to the Learn modules and they will get you that background information that was listed as a prerequisite here. So continue in your learning journey. Microsoft is trying to make as much of this information available to you as possible, but we're just picking up the specific content that would be the foundation for the exam that we come here. Now, the Azure documentation, again, I'm going to be going out through this quite a bit. I love our documentation. It is so much better than it used to be. I lived through the days of getting CDs, with TechNet documentation listed on it, and it could be weeks, potentially months stale. It could have news features that were out that weren't on that content. This is all live, it's current, it's accurate, and the cool thing is they've given it to you in a variety of different formats. What we have typically in many of the modules that we deal with is when you get to the Azure documentation, down the right hand or left hand side, they'll have the detail information that you're working with. They'll hyperlink this off to other areas. And as we get into the Azure portions, you'll see it breaks up into several areas. There's knowledge pieces. There's how-to guides. There's sample for getting started to get you a development or deployment already built. You can bookmark it. You can download the PDFs. You can mark it up. So the Microsoft Learn content is great, but also the Azure documentation for me is the authoritative source of truth for anything. We try and do a very good job of keeping our Learn content in line with the Azure content and the Azure documentation, but you'll see in a couple of the modules, hopefully we've got them corrected as we go through. If not, you might find me adjusting some of the current documentation states versus what's in the content itself. Azure Forums, Microsoft has asked all of us as employees related to the product groups to become more active. We've got a number of YouTube channels that are out there that you're working with. There's always been Channel 9. They're in the studio just down the way from us here. They're constantly putting out content. The product groups have blogs. They have forums that they're publishing, current state, current best practice or recommended practices that we're working with. And even myself, I'm a Microsoft technical trainer. We have a YouTube channel that we're putting out there as a brand for us to be able to help some of our customers and those of you that are in some of our special programs that we're dealing with. We've talked about these other document areas, Azure blogs that you might want to get a look with, and as I mentioned, in the Azure documentation, you could bookmark it, you can download the contents and mark it up and have that content made available to you in several ways. So my name is Bob Tickleman. As a premier field engineer in my previous role, I've been an architect at Microsoft. I'm currently a Microsoft technical trainer, but as an MTT, I look forward to seeing you and giving you the years of my experience to help you understand the hybrid reality that we live in with an on-premises and cloud environment. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next module.